Now, in this particular diagram, urticaria, it's like little tiny hives or wheels that break out on the skin. So you can see kind of the clusters here of elevations in the skin and the inflammation. Now, this can be extremely itchy. It can be extremely painful. And what happens to a lot of people is they'll get this, they'll get a diagnosis of hives. And oftentimes the allergist will do a test and they'll rule out, you know, environmental types of allergens. They'll do like a skin prick test and they'll look at environmental allergens. So things like dander, dust mites, cockroaches, cats, dogs, etc. And what I have seen very, very commonly is that sometimes allergists will find environmental allergens, but in many cases, the lesions persist. So those they don't go away. And so then what comes next when that persists is you get medicines like, again, steroids, oftentimes antihistamines. A heavy dose of antihistamines are the kind of can be the go-to course of action, you know, from a lot of doctors. So problem with that is both these medications suppress immune function and don't really solve why the problem exists. They can resolve the symptomatic outcome, but they don't really solve the problem, and they can suppress the immune system in the process. Steroids can also cause damage to the GI tract. If you're on them long enough, they can cause bone loss, they can cause muscle loss, they can cause calcium and magnesium and zinc deficiencies. And then antihistamines too can disrupt the stomach and digestion, along with suppressing the immune system. So, you know, if you're struggling with chronic urticaria and you are on these kinds of medications, you should have a conversation with your doc about those long-term consequences of those medications and see whether or not this could be helped. Now, there's a number of research studies that show that this is actually induced by allergies, including food allergies. There's some really great research that shows that elimination diets and that food allergy identification can actually help this really, really well. One of the bigger groups of areas of research is wheat allergy. Now, wheat contains gluten, obviously. So some people would say, well, is wheat allergy and gluten sensitivity the same thing? And the answer is no, they're not the same thing. You can be allergic to wheat and not sensitive to gluten. You can also be gluten sensitive and wheat allergic. You can also be not wheat allergic, but gluten sensitive. So there are different options there. And so again, this comes back down to testing. And I would say if you are struggling with the chronicity of this, you want to ask your doctor to test you for IgE, but also for something called delayed allergens or delayed response. Because some people's issue here is acute, meaning IgE related, and this can be food. So, you know, this could be something like shellfish or peanut or wheat or soy. This could be something, even something that you eat that you might not consider to be a common allergen, like oranges or lime or lemon, etc. But you can also have a delayed response to any type of food. Generally speaking, urticaria is also linked to gut dysfunction, as are many skin disorders. But where there's gut health issues, leaky gut, there oftentimes is a manifestation of skin issue. And so this is why looking at food, because what can damage the gut, right? It's food. Food can damage the GI tract, and then that can lead to a leaky gut, which can lead to a permeability that allows for these antigens and antibodies and other things to make it into the skin, creating an inflammatory response. So urticaria, another very common manifestation, skin disorder, that I've seen a number of people go gluten-free, completely resolve urticaria. Now, another one, let's move some of this out of the way and over. So this next one here is eczema, and you can see it very clearly. It's kind of like a scaly patch. Looks like almost like snake scales. You can see the division, but it looks too like the skin is cracking, so almost like reptilian-like in its nature. And this can get, a lot of times, we're seeing some of this right now with many of you that are overwashing your hands, like overutilizing soap and over emulsifying the oils off of your skin. So not having adequate skin oil can actually create eczema-like patches. So be aware of that, because right now everybody's hyper focused on hand washing, and you know, again, this can be one of the side effects of that. Is if you've got eczema isolated only to the hands because you've been washing your hands 12 times a day, then the likelihood that if you quit washing your hands as much, that the oil on your skin will start to you'll start to have oil again, and you'll allow this to heal and repair. You can actually get rid of it. But sometimes eczema is autoimmune too. And there's a lot of linkage between eczema and gluten sensitivity. There's also a lot of linkage between eczema and GI inflammation. There's some earlier research studies that show that GI inflammation was more common in people with eczema. Also psoriasis, which we'll talk about next, but since I'm talking about it, we'll just draw an arrow to it as well. So these scales, again, and a lot of times we'll see this like on the base of the feet. You can see it really anywhere on the body, but the hands, the base of the feet are really common areas for it to start manifesting. So gluten is a notorious reason why we might see eczema starting to outbreak. There are some nutritional deficiencies as well that we'll oftentimes see with eczema. Vitamin A and zinc are two big ones. Now, if you know the correlation with vitamin A and zinc, and that is zinc actually builds a protein called RBP. That stands for retinol binding protein. Remember that vitamin A is retinol, and that's kind of its scientific name. So zinc makes this protein called retinol binding protein that allows for the attachment to vitamin A, and it distributes vitamin A to your tissues. So think of it as a taxi cab to shuttle vitamin A through your bloodstream to get where it's supposed to go. So a zinc deficiency can actually cause a vitamin A deficiency that can manifest in such a way as to create eczema-like lesions. So eczema is another big one. I've seen a number of cases of this recover purely on diet change alone. Probably at least in my experience, the most diet responsive of all the things that we're talking about today, the quickest diet responsiveness in my experience has been eczema. Diet change in eczema goes a long way to get it to taken care of. Okay, this next one here, you'll see kind of this big plaque, right? Anytime you see like big plaques, it's plaques of dried skin and patches. This is oftentimes psoriasis. Now, your dermatologist should be able to pick up on this easy. So like if you have this, it's very, very common for it to affect kind of here. You see that little patch there, and you see on the elbow, a lot of times you'll see psoriasis. You'll also see it very commonly in the buttock region. You see it very commonly on the knees, but it can affect any area of the skin. And so this one actually is an autoimmune condition as well. So again, the theme or the trend goes on. Now there's another disease called psoriatic arthritis. And so oftentimes these two go hand in hand. So a person will have an arthritis, but they'll also have these patches, and they're connected. Psoriasis, notice the similarity between the wording, right? So psoriatic and psoriasis, basically these two go hand in hand. Now you can have psoriatic arthritis and not have psoriasis plaques, but it's very, very common for people that develop this autoimmune form of arthritis to go on to develop plaques, or for people that have psoriatic or psoriasis to go on and develop psoriatic arthritis. So this one can affect your skin. It can affect your joints. There's some research that shows gluten antibodies basically in the skin. And when a gluten-free diet is implemented, you get a reduction of these antibodies, and you get a reduction of skin rash or the skin lesion itself. And so an improvement, right? And so this really, actually some really good scientific evidence showing that a psoriatic or a psoriasis on the skin will respond really, really well to diet change. There have been some other foods linked to this one as well. Dairy is a big one also. So if you recall, I did a video a number of months ago on dairy versus gluten. So you can go back, and if you're not already subscribed, you can pull that up in our archives and you can watch that. But I talk about some of the similarities and some of the cross-reactivity between dairy and gluten, and why a lot of medical conditions that can be caused by gluten can also be caused by dairy because of these similarities. So dairy and gluten are two big ones that can create this. So psoriasis, again, autoimmune disease, can respond really, really well to a gluten-free diet. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.